Hello, I'm Carolyn. The incident I'm about to share happened a couple of years ago, and I'm grateful to say that I've distanced myself from the individuals involved. While we had our share of good times, the negative experiences ultimately drove a wedge between us. Before diving into the story, I think it's important to give some context about my ex-husband, Albert, and his family. Albert and I met during our senior year of college, often crossing paths in the library on weekends. Those shared moments led to conversations, dates, and eventually a blossoming relationship. About 6 months after graduation, we decided to move in together. Albert, with his carefree and easygoing nature, balanced out my more structured personality. His relaxed approach to life complemented my need for organization perfectly. As we settled into our new life, we felt it was time to introduce each other to our families. My family, being quite protective, put Albert through a sort of interrogation before accepting our relationship. On the flip side, meeting Albert's parents revealed the origins of his playful spirit. His family loved to play pranks as a way of bonding. Although they were considerate not to cross boundaries with me, knowing my aversion to such antics, their pranking began the first time we met. During that initial dinner, they unknowingly overloaded my plate with food while Albert hadn't mentioned their penchant for pranks. Everyone else praised the meal, while I struggled to consume an excessive portion. Albert's dad, Frank, insisted I keep eating, and I soon felt like I might burst. Finally, Albert's mom broke into laughter, telling me to stop. It turned out to be a prank, an initiation of sorts into their family. I couldn't help but laugh, and that moment created a light-hearted connection between us. From that day forward, I found myself either on high alert for pranks or happily joining in the fun whenever I visited Albert's parents. He seemed genuinely pleased that I could embrace their antics. One day, out of curiosity, I asked him why he was so appreciative of my easygoing attitude toward the pranks. As we drove home from his parents' house, I asked, "Why are you always so grateful after visiting your parents?" His answer surprised me, "Because you're okay with their pranks." I responded skeptically, "That's not a big deal. Who wouldn't be fine with harmless fun?" He explained, "Trust me, a lot of people can't handle it. I've lost relationships over it." I was taken aback. "That's absurd. This is all just light-hearted fun." Albert nodded. "Exactly. It means a lot to me. I'm not really a prankster myself, so I appreciate that you're cool with it. You even join in sometimes." I replied, "As long as no one gets hurt or crossed, it's all in good fun." He smiled. "I really hit the jackpot with you, didn't I?" I wanted to agree, but I teased him. "I'd love to say yes, but honestly, this is the bare minimum. I'm curious about the women you dated before me." Knowing he saw me as a refreshing change warmed my heart. He was the first guy I felt completely comfortable with, respecting my boundaries while ensuring we had fun. I was sure I had found someone special. After 4 years of dating, our engagement was no surprise. It took a playful turn during dinner at Albert's parents' place when his mom, Amanda, accidentally spilled wine on my dress. I laughed, knowing it was likely another prank. Amanda led me upstairs to change into dry clothes, explaining that her good ones were in the wash. I suggested trying on Frank's clothes, but she insisted they would be too big. Not wanting to argue, I went along with it. When I returned downstairs, Frank noticed something in my pocket. To my surprise, it was a ring box. Albert knelt down and proposed, and I couldn't help but scream with joy. It felt like the best prank ever. We planned to marry the following year. While I enjoyed the playful spirit of Albert's family, I knew I didn't want any pranks on my wedding day. I envisioned a celebration filled with joy, free from mishaps or embarrassment. Approaching Frank and Amanda felt delicate, so I hoped Albert would take the lead. Although it made me anxious to bring it up with him, it was far easier than confronting his parents directly. One night, just before bed, I decided to broach the subject with Albert. "Hey, I need to talk to you about something a bit sensitive," I began. "I love your family, and I appreciate how comfortable we are with each other, especially with the pranks, but I was thinking it might be best if they could refrain from pranking at our wedding." "Why not? I want our wedding to be perfect," he replied. "What's more perfect than everyone laughing together?" I countered, "There are other ways to make people laugh without turning it into a prank. Plus, my parents really aren't fans of them, so I was hoping you could talk to your family about it." "No way, I'm not doing that. They won't listen to me." "Look, I get that this is a big event and your family wants to express themselves, but it's my wedding too. I'm just asking for one small thing, no pranks for a few hours. It's just this one time." I'm on board with whatever you want, but I won't be the one to tell my parents. You'll have to do it. I'm already doing you a favor by agreeing to this. If you want it, you need to ask for it yourself. Frustration bubbled within me. I wasn't asking for anything unreasonable. I'd never expect him to approach my parents about something that would upset them. Despite my efforts, Albert remained stubborn, determined to ensure our big day remained prank-free. I decided to speak directly with his parents. One evening, I invited Amanda and Frank over for dinner to discuss my concerns. As I shared my thoughts, they were less than pleased, arguing that I was robbing Albert of a cherished family tradition on his special day. I couldn't fathom why it had to play out during such an important occasion. The atmosphere grew tense between us. After a heated discussion, they reluctantly agreed to forego pranks at the wedding. I let out a sigh of relief, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. Albert seemed distant, and despite my attempts to connect with him afterward, he remained unresponsive. At a certain point, I began questioning my own sanity. Was I really making that big of a deal out of this? Was I being unreasonable? The last thing I wanted was to jeopardize our marriage before it even began. Torn between my feelings, I turned to the one person I knew would offer me clarity, my mom. She had always been level-headed, never letting emotions cloud her judgment, and she had experienced some of Albert's family's pranks without holding on to any resentment. I approached her, unsure if I was wrong for not wanting any pranks at our wedding. She listened carefully, acknowledging that, while she hadn't enjoyed their antics, she never had a serious issue with them. I explained that I wanted a traditional wedding, free from the pranks I feared might get out of hand on such an important day for Albert and me. She asked about Albert's thoughts and whether I'd spoken to his siblings, Amanda and Frank, about my concerns. I told her that Albert was upset, and we'd even argued with his parents, who, though they'd agreed to refrain from pranks, were acting distant. We both suspected they were secretly planning something big, and I was likely the intended target. My mom reassured me that I wasn't wrong for wanting a prank-free wedding, encouraging me to continue trying to talk to Albert. She believed he would eventually understand. Her words gave me the clarity I needed. I wasn't overreacting, and I wasn't losing my mind. Taking her advice to heart, I worked up the courage to have a real conversation with Albert. It took a few days, but he finally started opening up. Though there was still a sense of distance between us, I accepted that he probably felt guilty for going against a family tradition. Then, about 3 weeks before the wedding, Albert's attitude shifted. He became incredibly sweet, acting like the man I fell in love with. It was a relief to see him happy again, but something about the sudden change felt off, like he was hiding something. I tried to ignore my gut feeling, and when I brought it up, he assured me everything was fine and that he had accepted my wishes. The wedding day itself began beautifully. The ceremony was everything I had hoped for, filled with emotions, and Albert and I both teared up as I walked down the aisle. It was a perfect moment, but when the reception started, things quickly went south. As we approached the cake table, surrounded by our guests, I reached for the knife to cut the cake. Suddenly, Frank grabbed a piece and hurled it at us, igniting a full-blown cake fight. I stood there, stunned, as Albert and Amanda joined in. The room fell into an awkward silence while Albert's parents erupted in laughter. I was humiliated, remembering how clear I had been about not wanting this. Albert noticed the tears building up in my eyes and tried to talk to me, but I couldn't handle it. I walked out of the hall, and he followed, grabbing my hand and asking, "What's wrong?" I couldn't believe he didn't understand. I expressed my disappointment, emphasizing that I had asked for one simple thing, and they had deliberately done the opposite. Albert tried to brush it off, calling it a harmless prank, but I was deeply hurt by their disregard. "I'm upset, Albert. I explicitly asked you not to do this, and instead, you went behind my back. Worse, you thought it would be funny to humiliate me with your so-called perfect prank." "To be honest, it was my parents' idea," he admitted. "I just went along with it." "That's exactly the problem," I said, my frustration rising. "You knew how much I didn't want this, and instead of telling them no, you let it happen. You let them humiliate me, and then you had the nerve to call me a crybaby. This wasn't just about the prank. I spent money on my dress, on my makeup, everything to make this day perfect. You ruined not only the moment but the memories I'd hoped we'd capture together." Enraged, I left and went straight to my mom's house. Thankfully, I knew where the spare key was hidden under the flower pot, and I let myself in. I stripped off my sticky, cake-covered clothes and took a long, hot shower, trying to calm down. In the days that followed, I couldn't bring myself to face Albert or his parents. My mom offered comfort, and I learned that the wedding party had taken a sharp downturn after the prank. Guests disapproved, and Albert's parents faced backlash for their behavior. Despite this, Albert kept trying to apologize, and after a week of ignoring him, I finally agreed to meet. When we sat down to talk, I could see the genuine remorse in his eyes. He apologized sincerely, promising never to let anything like that happen again. I saw his regret, so I decided to give him a second chance. His parents, however, didn't reach out to apologize until 4 months later. Reluctantly, I heard them out, and they expressed their regret for what had happened. During that time, I reflected on Amanda and Frank's role in the prank. Holding a grudge seemed pointless when they had begun making efforts to repair our relationship. Slowly, I decided to give them a chance. They invited us to dinners, refrained from any more pranks, and genuinely apologized, though I remained cautious, especially at important events. I eventually forgave them as they proved they had changed. 3 years into our marriage, I received a substantial promotion, which gave us some extra money to enjoy. I suggested taking a luxurious trip to Venice. Albert was thrilled but asked why I wanted to spend money on a trip rather than save for a house. I reassured him that I'd already set aside enough for the house, and this trip was a well-deserved treat. He then suggested inviting my parents, who hadn't been on vacation in years due to financial struggles. At first, I hesitated, but eventually, I agreed, under the condition that my parents would give us space and cover their own expenses. Despite Albert's reassurances, I still harbored some wariness, given past experiences with Amanda and Frank. To ensure everything went smoothly, I took precautions. 5 days before the trip, Amanda and Frank stayed at our place to be closer to the airport, and things seemed normal, with everyone excited for the vacation. The night before our flight, as I handed out tickets and passports, none of them checked what I gave them. This worked in my favor because I had only given them one-way tickets. I figured if anyone tried to pull something on me during the trip, they'd be stuck in Venice with no way back during peak season, where flights would be outrageously expensive. I hoped this would keep them on their best behavior. That night, I went to bed feeling optimistic, but when I woke up, Albert was gone, a rare occurrence since he was never an early riser. The house felt eerily quiet. I checked the guest room, but their luggage was gone, only mine remained. Alarm bells rang as I returned to the bedroom, where I found a note taped to the door. I'd fallen victim to yet another prank. Shock wasn't my immediate response, just sadness. I had believed we were past this, but clearly, Albert and his family enjoyed sabotaging my special moments. Glad I had executed my own plan, I waited until I was sure they had landed in Venice before making a call. When I tried contacting Albert and Frank, they didn't answer, but Amanda picked up. Her casual greeting set me off, and I accused them of leaving without even waking me. She brushed it off, suggesting I book another ticket. That's when I revealed they had only one-way tickets. Panic set in on her end as I calmly explained that I was done. I told Amanda I was filing for divorce. In the aftermath, Albert left numerous voicemails, ranging from angry to pleading, but my decision was firm. In the end, I finalized the divorce and moved on. The whole experience taught me that boundaries, even with family, are essential. Sometimes, even with the people we love, we need to prioritize our own well-being over preserving the status quo.